knowledge amongst American people, the prohibition of exploitative financial instruments, and the fact that a lot of usury laws that still exist in the United States are completely ignored. They go into states like the Dakotas where they don't have usury laws, and so these credit card companies can completely exploit people, when I think in the 19th century Americans would have been up in arms about a lot of what's going on now.
We had another email. I'm going to put this to you, if I may. This came in from Chicago in the USA, where Oshua Ryan wrote in saying, I think the US values the contributions of Muslim communities and respects them, but does not condone or nor accept the practices of Sharia law that goes against the legal and democratic principles of a modern, civilized societies of the 21st century. Now, I'm wondering, if you've had any contact with the United States government. I know you advise the government regularly on these kind of issues, on this issue of targeting the Sharia law, and how, if you have, you've advised them.
Well, I haven't actually, but I would say, first of all, again, the Sharia is not a threat to the United States Constitution or the United States law. Many of the things in Islamic law are rational. They're completely compatible with Western ideas. I think what people focus on are certain penal codes that much of which in the Islamic law is not agreed upon, but there are certain aspects of the Sharia. But even if you examine the Sharia, you'll find that it's actually profoundly nuanced. I think people see things like Nigeria, a woman being threatened of being stoned because of adultery or something like that. And these are, I think, the unfortunate trials and tribulations of having certain pre-modern conceptions that were quite normative in the pre-modern world that Muslims still adhere to in the modern world. And so places like Iran, where they do implement certain punishments that I think in the spirit of the Sharia would not be implemented in this day and age. You can't cut off the hands of people in consumer societies that we live in today. So there are many aspects of the Sharia, I think, that are just completely distorted. And another aspect that I think is really important is the fact that in the United States, by and large, you have a population of civil people. In fact, I think the demonstration that happened in Yorba Linda is an anomaly. I think the majority of Americans are decent people that acknowledge multiculturalism. America has always been a multicultural society. We have Amish people that don't use technology in the United States. There's no iPhones or iPads in Amish land. And so America has always allowed for people to explore alternative lifestyles as long as you do not go against the laws of the land. And that is Sharia. If you live in America, you have to follow American law. That is Sharia.
I'm going to bring in a caller, actually, who's been waiting on the line from Bangladesh. Rashid, thank you for being with us. What would you like to ask Sheikh Hamza Yusuf?
Hi, Riz. Hi, Hamza. Hope you're nice. Actually, in my experience, I found that in all the states in USA, all the religious people from different cultures, they are doing their religious activities very nicely. But my question is, after 1/11, is there the Muslims or any other religious people facing any problem to do their religious activities very freely?
Okay, so the impact of 9/11, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, what Rashid is asking is, following 9/11, have you seen any actual restrictions on people being able to practice their religion?
I think that in terms of travel, there has been problems for people that are Muslim. I think the government, to be fair, has tried to redress these oversights. Generally, though, I think American Muslims need to acknowledge the fact that there are still more hate crimes against the Jewish community, which is a profoundly enfranchised community in the United States, but there are still more hate crimes against the Jewish community than there are against the Muslim community. But what's troubling is the sentiment that has been increasing, and we're seeing a type of virulence of this attitude that's definitely on the increase. While there are not a lot of hate crimes against the Muslims, there are, and there have been mosques that have been attacked, even a few that have been burnt. Pigs' heads have been thrown in mosques, things like that. But generally, the Muslims, I think, have been protected in their houses and their homes. I think the FBI, despite some of the entrapment problems that have occurred, has tried to keep the Muslim community safe. So I want to be fair, and
Right.
I do think that overall the Muslims are still in a good condition in the United States, but this constant barrage of attacks and presenting Islam as an evil religion, and the talk show radio hosts that day in and day out talk about this, these things take an effect, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. There is an acceptable attitude towards Muslims. Be critical of Islam. People can be critical of Islam. But the idea of mocking people, of attacking them, of calling them demonically inspired terrorists, that the Quran breeds terrorism, these things are just untruths that are being spread around as gospel.
Okay. Let me ask you to take a call from Oliver in Virginia, who's also been waiting patiently. Oliver, thanks. Go ahead.
Do you think that this reflection has going to be another Western countries for the Muslims especially?
Okay, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, is there likely to be a parallel of what we're seeing in the USA and other countries? Now, we've seen it, of course, in parts of Europe.
Well, I think it's actually worse in Europe. I think that there is far more Islamophobia in Europe than there is in the United States. First of all, the Muslim community in Europe is far more disenfranchised than the Muslim community in the United States. I think Canada probably has the best record as far as I can tell. I think there's a lot of effort to allow the Muslim community to flourish in Canada. I think England has also tried to address these problems. Unfortunately, with the new government, there's been certain attitudes that are being presented. France has some really frightening aspects to what's going on there, and also in Germany and in other places. So the immigration to Europe, which was largely a labor immigration, people needed to rebuild Europe after the Cold War. There was a lot after the World War II. There was a lot of people brought into Europe from Pakistan and from Africa, and because these people were largely labor people, they were marginalized, they were ghettoized, and there's also a mentality that goes with that. So I think, unfortunately, in Europe, you've had a lot of social problems that we don't have in the United States.
Okay.
The immigrant community to the United States, the Muslim immigrant community, is one of the most successful communities in the history of American immigration. And I think part of this pushback right now is very consistent with immigration patterns in American history. Americans have always been provincial about a new group that comes into America, and have made it very difficult for them to become part of the American tapestry. So I think in some ways this is kind of an initiation into welcome to America.
John in D.C. is with us. John, go ahead.
Yes, people need to realize that in America, politics on the right is based on hatred. To get people to follow you, you must have an issue that they all can agree to hate, and Muslims are the latest victims of that. And also the 2.5% give back of the Muslim religion is much feared by the wealthy in America.
Okay, John, thank you for that. I'm going to